You're listening to the Around the Lens podcast, the home of high-quality, roundtable, visual journalism discussion about the news, topics, and gear related to our career field. Now, here's the host of our show, David J. Murphy.
Hello and welcome to episode 243 of Around the Lens. I'm your host, David J. Murphy, freelance visual journalist based out of South Korea. Joining me this week is my regular co-host, Evelyn Hochstein, a Washington, D.C. based visual journalist working on that freelance world, and also just tried the Canon R5. Hello, Evelyn. How are you?
I'm great. Good morning, everybody. Really good. We can talk about the R5.
Indeed. We'll talk about that a little bit later on in the show when we talk about our gear segment and stuff like that. But definitely eager to hear about your experience with it, and we can chat about our co-experiences with it and see if it's the right camera for you or you, right. Evelyn, anyone. But beyond that, I know you've been covering the RBG events and whatnot. Were you at the courthouse, the Supreme Court?
I was. Yes, Friday night I was having my holiday dinner with my family. Wasn't paying much attention to my phone, and it rang. It gotten some news alerts, but I didn't look at them, and then it rang, and I looked and I went, uh-oh. It's an editor from the Washington Post. And then I didn't answer right away, and I went, oh shit, what happened? So I quickly looked, and then I realized, oh my gosh, and I just made the announcement to everybody at the table, and everybody was in shock, and I called back, and she said, I know you're, having a holiday, it's Rosh Hashanah, can you go? And I just sort of looked at my family and went, I gotta go. And it was really great because my niece and my sister-in-law came with me to the Supreme Court, so I think for them it was really moving and interesting to see how I work and be part of it, and it was so monumental. And because RBG was Jewish, there was sort of this continuation of the holiday, I think, in her honor there. So it felt it was very powerful. But I don't often just it was big enough news that I had to go. And I'm really glad I went. And then I went the next morning, Saturday morning, and Saturday night again. So. Big
What
news
a great thing
in
to
DC.
share with your family. That's such an organic thing just happened. That was really nice.
Yeah, I felt exactly the same way. They know what I do. They don't always get to witness it. And then to see everyone else, how people just come in an organic way and gather in these moments. And what was so amazing is that people were sitting on the steps of the Supreme Court. And it's almost, you can walk up them, but it's almost always closed off when there's an event, a protest, a gathering. Mm-hmm. And because it happens organically, and it was just so moving. It was full of, people in places that they wouldn't get to be communing together. And then the next morning when I went back, there were barricades up and you couldn't climb the steps to the Supreme Court. So It was really, really powerful that first night. Yeah.
Well, a sad day losing such a tremendous icon in the world of law and human rights and civil rights. But it's the good silver lining is finally something is happening in D.C., right? It's been boring. There's been nothing going on. Now something is happening. But no, obviously a tremendous loss. So our hearts go out to anyone who was affected by that. Our guest this week, and the voice you just heard, making his second appearance on the program, is Mr. Brad Smith, the Vice President of Photography for the WWE and founder of Brad Smith Creative, based out of New York City. Hello, Brad. How are you?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. I'm great, thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Glad to have you, Brad. We're planning to dig really deep into some of the aspects of, what's going on in your world with regard to WWE photography and your consulting business, anything, going on in personally your world with regard to COVID and how you're dealing with that, and, just so everything else going on in the world. How are you doing?
Yeah, we're doing pretty well. We're in a Manhattan apartment, so you can kind of visualize what that's like. We are beyond fortunate that we have 2 floors in our apartment. Wow. So I can't tell you what a lifesaver that's been. We've saved a tremendous amount of money on marriage counseling probably because of that. So it's, I'm not sure how people have survived that much time together, but we're lucky to have the 2 floors. And my wife and I have a toddler. We have a 2-year-old that's with us, and she's takes up a lot of energy for both of us, but it's been fun. And my wife is actually a photographer as well, Jennifer McClure, and she's kind of turned it into a project over time. It kind of organically just kind of turned into an at-home project of her and being with her daughter during COVID and all this, and how to kind of manage that and everything, and has produced some tremendous work that's gotten out there. So that's been fun to see. Normally I'd be at work when all that's happening. I'd be in an office and all that would happen, and I'd come home and see the results. Now I'm actually seeing it happen, and it's been a pretty great experience as far as spending time with my family. That part has been a positive.
Yeah,
so
I think that's the one thing a lot of people say is that they're able to kind of reconnect with their family, or this is giving them more than enough time to spend time with their families. That's great.
100%. Yeah.
Well, since we're talking about COVID and we're talking about your work, let's get right into it. You work for the WWE. You're a photographer for them, or the vice president of photography for WWE.
Yeah.
So first tell us a little bit what that means, and then kind of follow up with how COVID has affected the WWE and kind of where it's at now.
So definitely, just to clarify, not a photographer for the WWE, not a photographer for anybody.
Vice president of photography.
Yeah, so I just want to be clear, because that's a slap in the face to the people that actually take the photos, which is not me.
Right.
So I oversee the department. I run a team of photo editors and researchers, and that's everything from we use those images across the board for every platform the WWE has. I mean, anything. If it's your world and you see a photo within the WWE, whether it's merchandise or whether it is advertising or key art online, or whether it's the banners in the city hanging, or when you go into the arena and it's on the Tron and so forth, all those images are our images, and we take them, we manage them, archive them, we distribute them throughout the platform of the WWE, the various platforms. And it's a busy, never-ending rotation of images. When the show was traveling, which obviously is not at the moment, like everybody else, we're kind of at a standstill trying to figure it out. But when it was traveling, we had 3 live shows per week, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, all around the country. And then we would have, basically once a month, we have what we call a pay-per-view, which is one of the bigger shows. You would probably know WrestleMania as a brand. So they're like WrestleMania, but smaller, and WrestleMania is the big one at the end of the year. It's our World Series, Super Bowl, Olympics, and Oscars all rolled into one. And we have one of those a month, and so those are in different locations and so forth. So we have a team of photographers that travels around the country, and then we have shows that go on the road out into the other parts of the world, Europe a lot, South America, other parts, Asia, India, different places that we go. And we have photographers that travel with them. We generally have, as a rule, we have 2 people at ringside, and then they stay kind of like they're in a specific corner at ringside covering the show. And then we have at least one more kind of in the stands mostly. It's called a hard camera position. And they sit in a seat, basically, like say 25 rows up or something like that. So they get more of an elevated version of it. They can see the entrance a little cleaner and stuff like that. So then we also have a studio that we set up in every single arena that we go to. We set up some kind of makeshift studio that we just throw together. We have a template for the lighting, so it's like kind of the same throughout. There's a consistency throughout that we do. And we get the talent to come in, and that is to kind of refresh the images we have, because character changes, they get new gear to wear, they get a new tattoo, a new haircut, whatever, that type of thing. So we cover all of those things for the company, and then we distribute them out. So it really never ends as far as the coverage itself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you said are there shows going on right now, or is it all been put on hiatus? Okay.
So right now we are taping out of Orlando, and we've got an arena. We're at the Amway Center, or Amway Arena, I believe it's called, in Orlando, and most of our shows are out of there. So we have a show that's on Fox on Friday nights. It's called WWE SmackDown. And we have a show on the USA Network on Monday nights called WWE Raw. So those are our 2 flagship shows, and those are filmed in the Amway Arena. So we have basically the same exact show minus 14,000 people. So that's the one difference, of course, is that there's no fans. The WWE creative team came up with this great idea of having, which other people have also done to various degrees of success, but I think we do a really great job. We have these LED boards, individual LED boards, about 1,000 of them, and fans log in, just like kind of we are right now, and we're on the LED board watching the show and then cheering and booing or whatever you do, reacting during the show. So that's our version of fans at the moment, as it was for the NBA is using those, and other sports are using those. I think even the Emmys last night used something similar to that with all the different kind of Zoom call things. It's the same principle. And so it gives at least a feeling that some people are there. But the shows themselves are the same. You have 2 people, you have a referee, they have a match, they have a winner, they have a loser, and they do that process. So we still cover it pretty much the same way, minus the fans.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, hopefully we can get fans back into stadiums at some point in the future, but I know that's a big challenge for all major sports right now. I saw the cardboard cutouts the MLB is using, right? That's kind of the meme or whatnot. For you, as somebody, you covered obviously before COVID and now after COVID, is it kind of eerie sort of being in there during the show? And, it's kind of like, is it eerily quiet?
Yeah, so I haven't actually been to the arena. We've kind of like separated, and we're trying to keep a relatively small footprint there. I mean, it's a group that goes. They get, they go through all the protocols that we're supposed to go through. Very safety conscious about it. So they kind of limit that number. So there's really no reason for me to wander down there just to watch.
Right.
But the team that's there is definitely saying that you can. There are moments where you can hear a pin drop because. There's no fans, and and at the end of the day, we're still a TV show. That's our basis is we're a TV show, and we also have a show on Wednesdays as well. Our NXT show is on Wednesdays, and that show is also done in the Orlando area. So all 3 shows, at some moment or another, there's a moment where you realize there's no fans in there because I'm sure it's quieter and so forth. But I think like anything else, you just kind of get used to it after a while. I mean, in a way, fans are great because they kind of mask a lot of stuff. You walking by and you talking to somebody, nobody's really going to hear it. I think you probably have to be a little more self-conscious about it with no fans, just to make sure your phone doesn't ring or something like that. But overall, I think it's still, once the show starts, it's a 2-hour show on Fridays and a 3-hour show on Monday. So they're just kind of locked in and shooting the show.
Right. The performers are going to perform the same way. With or without an audience.
I mean, for the most part, 100%. I mean, I think everybody whether it's a concert or a play or a baseball game or a wrestling show, everybody to some degree feeds off of the fans. That's part of the reason you get into it, is because people are watching and you get cheered and you get booed and there's a lot of interaction. So I'm sure everybody misses it to some degree, and that's kind of missing. But at the end of the day, we have like this incredibly professional team from top to bottom, from the people that put in the equipment to the referees to the talent to the announcers. Everybody's pretty much a pro on it, so it's all done really, really well, and they're making a huge effort. I think everybody that's involved in that right now should be commended, whatever sport you're in, for making the effort they're making without fans. They're still trying to entertain people, because that's all of this, whether it's a Yankees game or our wrestling show or a 49ers game, you're just trying to entertain people, and it can't be easy to do without fans, but we're doing the best we can.
Absolutely. I mean, it must be a challenge. You're so used to the reaction of the fans, either good or bad, and for that to completely gone, it must mess with their flow, their mojo, whatever you want to call it.
I think at some point, the timing and so forth for just everybody in that live event business in general is probably hard to kind of adjust to at first, but I think they've all picked it up by now. It's been going on long enough that I think they've all adapted pretty well. And so, I think we've done a good job of entertaining, and if you focus in on what's going on in the arena, then that's what you came to see anyway. So if you're watching it on TV, I think you're still entertained by it, just as you would be if somebody hit a home run. It's still a home run's a home run. Absolutely.
This isn't the first time you've managed photographers. Of course, you worked for Sports Illustrated for a long time. Of course, you were managing photographers, sending them out on assignment. Sending photographers like Evelyn Hochstein out on assignment.
Yes,
to cover things. How would you compare the two sort of fields? How do you compare this to WB? Or Sports Illustrated WWE?
Yeah, I would say that the major difference is that one's an editorial product, and you are kind of working with more editorial guidelines of covering the events and then presenting to editors, and they kind of go by, they're working in conjunction with a writer. When Evelyn was shooting for us, she was working with a writer, whether the writer was there or not, and whether she knows it or not at the moment, she's still working with a writer, so it's all kind of flowing together. If the writer has something really important in the story, Evelyn needs to get a picture of that, for instance, and so forth. And whereas the WWE, it's an entertainment company, so it's you're still taking photos kind of the same way. I mean, in a lot of ways, what we do primarily is this action photography for the WWE, and then we roll it into this huge kind of spectacle at the same time with the lights and the branding and the fans and the event and all that. Whereas I think editorial photography is more centered on the action primarily that's taking place in the arena itself. There's rarely going to be a football picture that's more important than a guy throwing a football or a guy catching a football or a guy scoring a touchdown. Whereas in the WWE, we like that action, but we like to pull back a little bit and show the atmosphere, so that to show what it would be like to be at the event. So it's more of an entertainment value instead of the actual sports value. So that's kind of the difference between the two companies. But I learned a lot from both of them, and have brought stuff to each. I brought stuff from editorial world into the WWE, which has been helpful for sure. But it's still, all of these photographers, guarantee you, could swap over. If I took my WWE photographers and sent them to a sporting event after a little practice, they would be able to at least assimilate and shoot a sporting event to some degree, and vice versa. I could take 2 or 3 SI guys and train them to shoot WWE, and they'd be able to. So I think the talents are fairly interchangeable. And Evelyn's a good example. If I hired her to shoot something for the WWE, she could certainly do that just as easily, and I'd get the same quality product either way.
I think he's offering you a job, Evelyn. Go down there and shoot some WWE.
Yeah. Well, you never know.
Good. Sorry, guys.
No worries. We were talking about that a little bit before the show. Evelyn, what kind of assignments did you do for Brad when you worked with him?
Oh gosh, this was a long time ago. This is early in my career. I shot, he was at Sports Illustrated for women, and I'm trying to even remember. I don't know how I got in the door. It was, starting my career. I was based in Jerusalem, and I think I was in New York making the rounds with editors, and I met Brad, and sure enough, I think she was, I don't know, the editor or managing editor, I don't remember. This woman was coming to run a half marathon at the Dead Sea. So I actually got an assignment after that meeting, which was wonderful. And then I don't think I did anything else. And then the next I heard from Brad was at the New York Times, which was many years later. I mean, at least probably 12 or 13 years later. And some DC based. I'm not really a sports photographer. These were sort of feature stories, but around sports. And the one was about kids who like homeschool and play sports. And it was pretty cool because it got on A1, which is, not the norm necessarily for a sports story. So that was fun. No. And then I guess then, Brad, you went off to start your consulting business, and I started freelancing for the Washington Post. So I haven't done much, but then I did bump into Brad in DC at what we call the photo prom, the White House news photographers annual gala, which I guess we're not going to have this year, but
it's fun to get dressed up.
It was, yes, a lot of people. That was fun. So I hadn't seen Brad in fact, even at the New York Times, I mean, this wasn't an in-person contact. So there's no way he would have remembered me. But me as the freelance photojournalist, of course, you always know the names you remember those names. And actually, I feel like that was one of the first good breaks, Dream World, to shoot something for SI Women. So I certainly remembered Brad and ran up to him and said, "Hey, I'm Evelyn Hudson. We've had phone or email or whatever. This is me in person." So it was fun to reconnect.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's kind of one of what Evelyn just touched on is really important to remember, that it's I get so many people over the course of my career as I teach at workshops or whatever, I want to shoot sports. And you have to really kind of break it down as to what they're looking to do. And most people think I want to shoot sports. They want to stand on the sidelines and they want to shoot a game. But Evelyn doesn't do that, but she still shot sports for me because it's sports related. Like she said, there's a lot of feature work to be done in sports, and there's a lot of portraits to be done in sports. There's a lot of things to do without actually shooting the game, and people should kind of recognize that and realize they can be involved in it. And shooting sports doesn't, like any other activity, doesn't just mean going to a game. So I need people like Evelyn just as much as I need somebody like an Al Bello at Getty or a Robert Beck at Sports Illustrated, those great sports photographers that can shoot action. I need somebody like Evelyn as well who can go in and do a feature story.
Yeah, you're not going to hire me to shoot the actual sporting event. I mean, I don't think I've done that since I worked for like the local newspaper,
Yeah.
But like the stories we did were certainly the one for the New York Times. I mean, I'm like at a home where, I think they were Catholic and they had like 8 kids and they were homeschooling. So I'm like spending the day with a family, photographing all those family activities. And then I'm following the boy as he goes off to soccer practice. And so there was, there was action, but yeah, it was definitely and I loved it. I mean, I think that's the beauty of also being an editorial photographer. I mean, like the sort of reportage photography that I do. And you can work in all mediums, like Brad said, and you can do that storytelling, and it doesn't have to just be hard news or politics or whatever. Yeah.
Right. And I think with the WWE, Dave, we have similar type thing where not everything is somebody in the ring flying around and jumping off the ropes and pinning somebody and we have a lot of other activities that we do as a company. And I need photography to cover those events. We have the studio, like I said, that's a skill set to be able to bring somebody in and get their character because they play characters. That's what they do, and they're really good at it. And they're in character like an actor. And that's what has to convey in the photo. It's like shooting the still photography, for a movie. You want them in the character they are in their movie, not how they are at home in their living room. And then I have events in places like DC or every other city in the country where we do community service type things, and we have photographers that document. Maybe we visit kids in a hospital or go to a school and talk about anti-bullying campaigns or whatever it is that we're doing. Then I hire a different photographer to cover that type of thing. So we, again, use photography across the board. We try to find the best photographers available that have those skill sets, and we bring them in to shoot. So it's been a great opportunity for me to kind of expand the photography pool that we pull from for the WWE and pull on some people that I know from outside to come help us and work with us. And I think that our photography is pretty exceptional.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, again, I showed some of the work that you sent me earlier in the discussion. I just showed that, as a little slideshow at the beginning. And, like you were saying, showing the crowd, like the shots where you could see the crowd and they were in focus. Shooting at a relatively high aperture there, so you can see the signs, you can see the reactions. I thought that was pretty cool. And then, of course, obviously the aerial stuff. I was trying to think about my own career, and I know we talked a little bit about this beforehand. Evelyn, you said you've never shot this type of thing, but I actually have shot something like this. It was one of my first assignments while working in Long Island, and it was working for a newspaper, and they sent me to shoot this. Lucha Libre, right?
Lucha Libre, right?
Yes, okay. So it was Lucha Libre, and it was a guy who was wrestling an imaginary character. So it's just one guy, but he was doing all the wrestling moves to the imaginary invisible character, and that was my first and really only experience shooting that style of pro wrestling type of stuff. So
I hope he won.
I don't remember. I think he did. I think in the end, it was a tough battle though. He was getting his butt whooped.
Well, if you think about it, what's the difference between that and a one-person show? If you've ever gone to watch somebody do a one-person show as a play or whatever, I mean, that's essentially what that is. What's the difference?
I mean, I think that requires even more performative capability because you're only acting off yourself. You have no one else to act off of.
Telling a story by yourself about 2 people. Yeah. That's not easy.
Yeah, I wonder though if it's for WWE, if it's easier or harder to shoot it when there's like 4 people or like half a dozen people in the ring. You get those crazy moments like that,
It's definitely easier when it's one person against one person and a referee.
Yeah.
Let's just start with that. It's like an upside down pyramid. It certainly starts out very easy that way, and it gets worse as you go down, as far as the difficulty of making sure you get everything, and also the risk of the fact that people are flying around. These are huge, very strong, athletic men and women, and they do a lot of maneuvers that aren't normal for the rest of us. So you have to kind of pay attention and so forth. So you have to give them a little distance. But each person you add in, 4 people, 6 people, add people, 8 people, starts to add to the opportunity. So that's the way I would kind of look at it. Is it's a little more difficult because there's so many things to watch at once, like a 3-ring circus. But at the same time, it gives you more opportunities. So, but those types of images with 8 people are better shot. The wider, the better, because it doesn't do good to have 8 people and there's 2-on-2 or 1-on-1. The better picture is further to show this is what the event was. This particular event was 8 people, and people are going crazy, and they're all in the ring at the same time, and it's chaos, and that's kind of the fun thing. Controlled chaos, of course.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, again, I was thinking about, obviously, both of us are minimally experienced with this type of thing, or don't have much experience with pro wrestling. And you said, you can take someone like us and sort of get us trained up into shooting pro wrestling. And as someone who's not, out there photographing it yourself, what are you telling sort of your photographers? What's kind of the advice you're giving? And, so maybe something that can be transported on to the, amateur photographers, maybe shooting a lower level wrestling event, non-professional. But, how are you instructing the photographer to capture imagery, as the photo editor type perspective?
Yeah, so generally the types of photographers we're using to cover the wrestling shows themselves, not the hospital visit, none of those other things, but show. Just the wrestling shows. Yeah. So all of those photographers have some degree of knowledge, experience, and so forth in shooting action.
Yeah.
Whatever it was, whether it was local football or whether it was a larger sport. I have a guy who's a former NFL photographer for an NFL team. He spent his career doing that. And he works for us part-time. And so I have guys like that, guys that shoot baseball, other sports. So that hand-to-eye coordination in shooting sports is really, it's an amazing skill set that people have. And when Evelyn was talking earlier about shooting it when she was first starting out, local newspaper or whatever, most likely she was probably shooting some local team and so forth. And the difference between high school and then the pros in any sport is like monumental, right? How fast they move, how quick they go, how high they jump, etc. The wrestling is the same way. And our guys start with a basis of knowing how to shoot sports. The best thing that we do is, and the way that to teach somebody for us from our point of view, is we would put them in that hard camera position that I mentioned earlier first. First of all, they're in no kind of pressure or danger or anything around the ring where something could happen with guys flying around. They're safely off to the side, like 50 feet up in the stands. And then they can get a feel for how the event flows. I was going to say the game, but how the event itself flows. You get it. Each person has an entrance, and each entrance is coming with music, and each entrance is like dramatic, and everybody cheers because somebody comes in, and it's real great. And that's part of the show. And then you see them come in, and then they talk a little bit, and there's a lot of psychology because they're telling a story. It's not just the athletic part. They're actually telling a story. There's a good guy, there's a bad guy, and so forth. And they're really trying to script their characters into the story. Then we would take people eventually down to ringside. And those photographers at ringside would work with somebody specifically for a while until they kind of gathered some confidence in shooting. You are actually working with a TV camera. You're like standing next to a TV camera. You have to learn, I can't stand in front of the TV camera. I can't get in front of the TV camera. I can't get in their way. I have to work in relationship, in tandem with them, because you're kind of tethered. And then the same way, the other photographer has the same type of criteria. We're there to document it, but it's a TV show. We're also not there to get in the way, you know? A journalist might at some point independently run in front of a TV camera because this photo is so important, and they can argue about it later.
Yeah.
I don't have that luxury, and I can't do that. So that's not happening because we're a TV show. So we have to work with that. But the key thing to remember is that not only is there that peak action, that great athleticism that we have, there's also the crowd and the spectacle. And then thirdly, there's also the brand. I mean, any company of any size or significance or status wants to have their brand out there. You know, any photo that shows the Super Bowl logo and the guys making the great catch is better than one that doesn't show the Super Bowl logo, right? Because you get all those components at once. So that's one of the things we're trying to work with them for, is with the photographers, is not only to shoot the action, but also to kind of incorporate whatever the atmosphere is. And we put on a pretty good spectacle. It's more like a concert in a way, you know, with the big truss and the big set build out and the lights and lasers and all that stuff. That all has to be incorporated into the photo itself. And that's why we can't just have people just shooting tight action in the ring. They can start with that to get a feel for it, but eventually they have to incorporate all of those components into one image. And that's kind of the key part for them. But when they're in that hard camera shot we talked about earlier, they can get a really good atmospheric shot of what it looks like. And you get a feel for it without going on the dance floor. You can kind of see how everybody else is dancing. And then you can kind of say, okay, I'm going to do this because I won't feel uncomfortable if I do this. And that's kind of the significance of sitting upstairs a little bit and shooting up high.
Yeah, you know, that kind of reminds me of the time when I was in the Marine Corps and we used to shoot the Marine Corps Marathon. And so the Marine Corps Marathon is run by an organization that their only job is to run the marathon and all the tertiary events around the marathon. Right. And so they would actually give us like a shot list of what they wanted shots of, and we would be instructed to try and get various iconic aspects of the marathon, because they would use that footage for not only historical purposes but promotion of next year's event. So I can definitely see the importance and value of that sort of aspect to commercial work. Evelyn, have you ever done anything like that in any sort of aspect of where you had to have like a key icon or aspect in your shots? Any commercial work in your background, or has it always been straight photojournalism?
I've done some commercial work. I'm just sort of, but I'm not thinking of an example like what you're describing, where it's been like a major event, like these types of events. So no, but I've definitely very little, but a few commercial jobs, but not the same style. Yeah.
You mentioned the tight shots and the wide shots and whatnot. So when you're giving them sort of the instruction and feedback, how long do you give them to sort of get comfortable with it before you start expecting them to be actually able to perform? Is that like one show or a couple of shows?
Yeah, a couple of shows, I think. And again, I have people who only shoot hard camera. I'm probably never going to train them to go shoot ringside because they're really comfortable in hard camera. I like them there. I can use them there. These are these are freelancers, of course, that I use them when I'm in that city and so forth. And I have people that are probably better at this point shooting the ringside, which is a really, like I said, a specialized skill set. So they can stay. But when we're training somebody, and let's not be wrong, I'm giving instructions on what I like to see, but I have photographers who actually work with them. I have two staff photographers, Eric Johnson and John Giamondo, and they physically train them in person. Those are the guys who actually stand by somebody and show them how to do it. And I think that we can all tell after 2 or 3 matches, maybe, or 2 or 3 shows at the most. If they haven't picked it up after 2 or 3 and heading in the right direction, we'll just cut bait and go ahead and let that loose, and maybe it's just not the best fit, and you can kind of tell. But it would probably take, I would say 2 shows. And if they haven't picked it up in 2 shows on where to be, what to shoot, get a feeling for it, and so forth, we probably will move on. Yeah, but honestly, I haven't. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I haven't really run into that yet. For the most part, I would say we have like a 90-something% success rate. Because I'm also looking at people ahead. I'm just not randomly. Nobody won a contest and said, "Hey, you want to be this?" Or, I've chosen people. My photographers have recommended people. We're working with people that we think they're going to be a good fit. And when you kind of have that instinct and you've been doing it long enough, you are right most of the time, to be honest.
Do people just kind of apply out of nowhere, or do you have like open sort of calls for photographers?
No, on the second part, absolutely not. The first part, yes, I do get applications, I guess is the best way, or whatever. They send me notes. I shoot wrestling because you have to remember, like every other sport, wrestling kind of falls into that category of there's some really small little groups, like people who only have enough money to pay one guy to wrestle at a time, so they have smaller groups, and that's how you can learn. And then they have bigger groups that have TV contracts, it's kind of there, and everything in between. So I have a lot of people who have tried their hand at wrestling in other places, smaller groups and so forth, that would like to work for us. And they send me their portfolios and their resumes, and I look at their work and I get an idea. But I also have to take into account is it's also a matter of geography.
Right.
I like to have as many people local as I can to kind of make sure that I have backups at the very least in these cities, in case something happens. What if my guys get snowed in and they can't fly in? Who can I call in Minnesota to go shoot that, and so forth? So I try to keep it regional as well, and that's probably where a lot of those guys will stay within that region. But you'd be surprised how many people have shot some form of wrestling at some point. Even if it's the backyard stuff, they've kind of just gravitated towards it, and then they come to me. And then a lot of them, honestly, Dave, are just like sports photographers. They work for that venue, or they work for a local sports team. This is kind of a natural progression for them to be able to do if they'd like to try it. I think most of them can pick it up.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
Yep.
Well, let's go ahead and move on to your consulting business, because I did want to make sure to talk about that. And I know, Evelyn, you were interested in that aspect of what Brad is doing. So talk to us a little bit about kind of why you started this sort of consulting business, and what does it do for photographers?
So I started it in between, after I left as director of photography for Time Inc. Sports and Sports Illustrated, and I had about a year in between that job and becoming the VP at WWE. So I started it at that point, and I started it with the idea of assisting. I started very narrow, actually, and then it's expanded just kind of in its natural way. I started thinking I could help photographers be better sports photographers if that's what their chosen craft was to be. I've been doing it long enough, editing and hiring and talking to photographers and listening and paying attention and gathering information, that I think I could work with them. This is what people are looking for. These are the type of images you need to have, and so forth. So I started out with that, and then gravitated towards more just photographers in general, like how to some degree improve their photography. But a lot of my work in the consulting, it's basically centered around two things. There's corporations and there's individual photographers. So I'm working with, I have some now, and I've been working with them all through the pandemic and so forth, really kind of, we created the website. My wife actually built the website for me. So it's Brad Smith Creative, and I have the website, and a lot of the photographers that are reaching out to me, they just need, they just need a little push, a little guidance. They kind of have hit a rut, which is how every creative person is at some point or another for all of us. You just kind of, you have writer's block, I guess is the best way to put it. And they need a little push. A lot of it is reviewing their websites, which essentially is their portfolio, and how can we create more of a dynamic look to that, and something that's more interesting to creative buyers and art directors and photo editors. And then also I can point them in the direction of where their work can go. I can make connections with them because of my time in the business. If I think that they're, the right fit for somebody, a magazine or a wire service or so forth. So a lot of it is individual photographers that just kind of need a little direction and a little redirection in a business that is becoming increasingly difficult to kind of stand out and maintain some steady work. And then I also work with corporations, and the corporation part is more in digital asset management. And what happens is that there are businesses, like entertainment businesses, know that they have photos, and they know what to use them for, and they know what the rights are with them, and they know how to accumulate them and distribute them. Like the WWE, they have it all figured out. And I'm sure that most movie companies and entertainment companies, they pretty much have it all figured out. But then you take other companies that you don't associate with visualization. Let's just say like John Deere tractors. I mean, they need photographs for various things, right? And they have these assets, but they don't really know how to utilize them. They don't really know how to bring out the value of them. And they don't even know they already have the images they need, and how to store them, and who can find them, and who can locate them, and who can distribute it through the platforms for the company. And I can help companies with that as well. So that part is kind of exciting. It's more strategic and bigger picture planning. And it's almost letting you know that you've had this all along. I'm just showing you that it's here and how to utilize it. And it's not just one person that knows about it. When they go on vacation, you guys don't know what to do. It's because a lot of it is that kind of thing. But right now, primarily, it's with individual photographers, just working with them and building up their books and making edits with them and creating a better look for them, and also making connections with them, which I'm able to do because of my experience in the business for so long. So that's primarily where the business is at this point. And it's keeping me busy, to say the least. You know, I do have another job, a full-time job, which is also more than 40 hours a week. So that keeps me super busy. And that's, make no mistakes, that's my priority, is the WWE. Everything else is just, I fill it in when I have time to fill it in. But I enjoy it. I enjoy it a great deal, because I've never enjoyed anything more in photography than the collaborative. That's always been my favorite thing. I never wanted to live in a cabin by myself and watch wolves for 2 years. I like sitting in a room with 4 or 5 people and we talk about stuff. And, you know, if it's one-on-one and I call Evelyn and say, this is the story, I like that part. And if it's an art director and 3 other people, I mean, I've always enjoyed that. And I think that's what this is with these photographers. It's a collaborative, you know. I've got everything from sports architectural photographers in California to people that don't even shoot sports. They're completely portrait photographers in New York that I'm working with. And it's just a matter of kind of making their work more accessible to the people that might be interested in their work.
I like what you said about, you know, helping creatives sort of get back out of that rut and get out of that sort of block, and helping them get on with their work of being creative, because I don't think there's a creative professional in our, you know, ever in any profession that hasn't been sort of stumped at some point. For me, I think, you know, it's back to my blocks, and it's like it's always been a new piece of gear that sort of helped me get out of my rut. If you know, and then of course you get gear acquisition syndrome, and then you get a whole closet full of lenses, or perhaps a junk drawer full of cameras that you don't use. But that's always kind of like, you know, I've gotten like, you know, the 50 millimeter 1.4 or the macro lens or something, just to kind of shake things up in my brain and the way I see things. Evelyn, how about you? I mean, have you ever been sort of in a rut, and would you ever consider perhaps a consulting service like the kind that Brad offers? You're muted, Evelyn.
Sorry. Yes, I was saying that I think it's a really interesting niche, because there used to be like the sort of agency, you used to have an agent, and there were so many photography agencies, and that era is long gone. So if you don't have an agent, and then as a freelancer now, I do almost all of my own sort of networking and connections. You have to like do them yourselves, and your agent in the past may have done that for you. So it seems like the consulting avenue is in using someone like Brad, who has the expertise and the connections, is like the new way of breaking into this industry, because you don't have, I mean, there are still photo agencies, and you probably met Brad, I imagine, when I was with a photo agency, and I'm in New York, and they set up meetings, but that was 20 years ago. So I can see that it totally makes sense for photographers who are like, oh, I can't get into Blackstar, I can't get into Gamma, or I can't get into Redux or whatever, and whatever they are, how do I do this? So that makes a lot of sense. And I haven't myself, I did briefly, like, I got a lot of emails once with Wonderful Machine, which I guess is a photography consulting thing, which, you know, it helped you brand your website. It doesn't necessarily make personal connections, but similar. And, you know, it looked appealing. At the end of the day, I think it was more geared for a commercial side of photography than for photojournalism. And it's not something I pursued, but I had some good conversations about it, because I sort of thought, okay, I'm in DC 10 years. What's new? Like, that's the rut you're talking about. Like, what new clients can I, you know, try to, what new avenues? Maybe it's doing more commercial work, you know. So I think it's super valuable. And, as a freelancer, sometimes you're not in the collaborative. Like, I love what Brad said. I feel very on my own sometimes, even though I work for the Washington Post. I'm out there in the field. I'm not a staff photographer. I get a call. I do my assignment. I send in my photos. I don't necessarily have a conversation or an edit or a talk. They just go in the paper, and that's great. And, you know, everybody's happy, but I'm not part of necessarily a bigger thing. And it can be very, I wouldn't say isolating. I think that's just how it is for a lot of freelancers. But I think there's a lot of value in having somebody to talk to and say, hey, what can I do differently? And your photo editor may not be able to do that, but Brad may be able to do that, and guide you and say, this would be better. This is how your website would be better. You might succeed better getting assignments like this if you do X. So yeah, all of those things. Sometimes when I think the rut you're talking about is like, sometimes you feel a little bit like, oh, I'm out there, I'm all by myself, I'm a freelancer. What do I do to like kick it in gear? And that seems ideal, obviously. And I think anybody also too, looking at just a new eye is always, it's like an editor. Everybody needs an editor in quotes. It could mean many things, an editor.
Right.
So
I also think that when we get hired by a magazine or a newspaper like Evelyn does, as soon as that thing it's in gear, that editor, I guarantee you, is already working on 2 more stories. And that's why there's no big exchange. And it's not they don't care or they don't want to tell you. It's just, I'm sorry, I have 2 more stories I have to do. And they've moved on, and that's the nature of that. And when you go to portfolio reviews, whether you pay or it's free or whatever, you usually get 15 or 20 minutes, whatever the clock says. You get these little increments with somebody, and it can be really valuable. And you exchange a card, you make maybe one connection if you're lucky, and all that's great. But that's also built to be really temporary, and it's built to be cut off, and it's built to end at that moment. So basically, what I offer is those same types of things, but it's more intimate in that now it's between me and you for as long as you want to do it. I mean, clearly there's a fee for that in exchange for that service, but the point is that, like, I'm giving you my attention and my time. I'm not looking at the other guy who's standing over their shoulder getting ready to drop his portfolio off because your time is up, and I'm not working on another assignment on another phone while you're calling to tell me your photos are done for the assignment you just did. It's just me and you. So photo consultants and people who do that, like myself, that's what they can offer you, is some concentrated time. They go in these sessions, pick 1, 2, 3, whatever's good for you. You won't get broke doing it, and you might gain a lot from it. And you'll definitely have like a refresher course. And that's the best part, is you just kind of once in a while need to recharge. And I think that's one of the things that I help with, is I just help people recharge their careers.
That's great. And it's I think a valuable service. Is it something that's offered like on an hourly basis, or do you just negotiate with each person individually?
Yeah, with the individual photographers, I do complimentary sounds so weird, but it's a free 15-minute phone call.
The first hit is free.
Yeah. It's a free gift with purchase.
Yeah.
So it's a 15-minute phone call just to see if we even want to have another phone call, and we're on the same page. And that I do. Then it goes hourly after that. So then I charge by the hour, and each session is an hour. I kind of have a bandwidth for like 1 hour. I've had people that want to do 2 or 3 in a row, and I'm like, no, I can't do that because it's too much for me. I just want to like concentrate on the hour, really devote a lot of time for the hour, and not spread it out over a couple. But I do the 1 hour session, and then almost always it's like a few days later we do the second session. It's pretty concentrated. Yeah. They've been running 3 to probably 4 sessions per person is what it is, and it generally is over, I would say, 2 or 3 weeks. If it's not once a week, it's a little bit less. I also have a photographer in the Midwest who's doing a very long-term, will take a year or more project. That one is specifically spread out over a period of time because I'm helping him edit and then guide where those images are going to go when he's finished. So I have to wait for him to go shoot, and he only shoots like once a month, this project. So that takes longer, but generally it works with work that's already completed. Let's look at it. Let's figure out how to utilize it and get it out there into the universe. And that's in these 1 hour sessions. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. When I found out, you had the consultancy business, obviously that got the gears turning, because I've never really looked into the aspect of photography consultancy before.
Right.
And so, obviously the first time we've really ever talked about the topic, because we've never had a photography consultant on the show. But I'm curious, obviously when you looked into becoming a consultant, can you tell us a little bit about that industry in general? I mean, is it a big industry? Is there a lot of consultants out there, or is it kind of like very small and niche?
Mm-hmm. I think I think in the scale of the universe, it's pretty small, but I think that for if you Google photo consultant, certainly X number of names do come up.
Right.
And they do offer everything. Like Evelyn was saying, there are people who will sit down with you and say, this is what your logo should be for your brand, for your business cards, and for your website. And there are people who will sit down and really I'm more going through their photographs, which photographs are going to be more valuable, in my opinion, for you to show photo editors and art directors. I have rearranged a couple of websites in the basic design, the principle of the template, but I haven't like redesigned somebody's logo because I'm not a designer, so I'm not going to be doing that. But I can go with you and tell you, I love this. This is a great idea. When I open it up as a photo editor, I want to go to the next page. This is really annoying. Stop playing music, and I don't want to hear it. And this is, nobody's going to ever listen to this. Please stop. So, I mean, I can have those kind of conversations with people, and that I think is helpful because they need at some point someone other than their best friends and their mom to tell them that they're doing a good job. They need to go outside that bubble. And freelancers notoriously live in a bubble. It's nobody's fault. It's just that's the business, you know. Yeah. And they live in that silo, and it's hard to get outside kind of opinions on the reality of it. But there's certainly a number of photo consultants around, and a lot of them are ex-photographers and photo editors, and some of them I'm not sure their backgrounds, but they're very good at what they do because they can calmly walk you through where your images stand and how you can place them into into a better location.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's get on to our last topic this evening. I always like to touch on gear, and there's always new gear coming out. I think the past few months, really, we've been gifted with so much great new camera equipment in the world, with the Canon and the Sony and everything that's going on. But, of course, we have to talk about what's most new, and what's most new is GoPro. They've got a new camera out. I believe it's the Hero 9. And it's their new big, awesome sort of camera. It can shoot 5K video, and it's got all the great features that come with the camera. 4K, I think 4K 120, and just everything you would think of with the GoPro camera. It's the best of what they currently make. But again, it's a GoPro. It's an action camera, and as we were talking about before the show, we all kind of have action cameras, and we use them for maybe a minute, or we have great ambitions about wanting to use them, and then we kind of throw them into a junk drawer and never use them before. With this new GoPro camera, we'll throw it over to you, Evelyn. Does this sort of reinvigorate your sense of creativity with regard to action cameras? Are you looking at this thinking, okay, I'm going to use it this time? Does it get you going?
Oh, this is a trick question. I don't want to not, I have no opinion about any of this. GoPro 2, never used it. Yeah. I love them in theory, but I'm not throwing GoPro under the bus, but this is just not something that gets me too excited. So, yeah.
Well, there goes our potential GoPro sponsorship.
I have no opinion. Yeah, no, darn it. I know I'm always blowing my potential sponsorships, but I'm just not, I'm going to admit, I've like the one use I could see doing it is, like if I'm on, skiing or something that I like to do, but not even, it's not my thing. The reason I bought a GoPro once was for this sort of documentary I was doing, and I thought I wouldn't be able to like hold up my camera, and I thought we'll rig up this GoPro so we have it rolling. So I get it. They're wonderful tools, but I'm not the one to speak about the GoPro, as mine is sitting in a drawer.
Yeah, I know,
so
right?
Unpacked.
Well, let me throw this at you, Evelyn, because one of our friends of our show, C.S. Muncie, he had a GoPro many years ago, and he probably doesn't use it for this anymore, but, one of the sort of neat ideas you can do with the GoPro for your line of work, especially covering protests and whatnot, is to sort of put it on one of those like chest rigs or helmet rigs, and you just sort of have it running when you need it to act as sort of like that, I guess you could call it like insurance camera, right? Or like, it's capturing everything. So if you get into a scuffle, or if somebody's messing with you, or if there's some sort of, something going on, you're constantly, you're recording it. Has that ever been sort of a thought that crossed your mind, or a potential use case scenario that you could see for that GoPro that's collecting dust, or this GoPro?
Yeah, actually I have. I do. I feel like I've thought about that, but there's something funny, I think, about having a camera that's recording all the time that doesn't feel right, like maybe as an editorial photographer. Like, even though I may pick up my camera and take somebody's photo, I'm not asking permission. I may then have a conversation with them or not. I almost feel like if someone sees that GoPro and it's recording, it creates some sort of weird vibe. This might all be in my head, but that just doesn't feel like, proper sort of editorial, ethical journalism. But in terms of, it would be amazing. Like, you're in a protest, there's tear gas flying, you're running, there's cops, you're not necessarily able to get good pictures. Like, I imagine the footage would be really great to have. And then obviously if something happens to you, you get shot, obviously that was good. But I don't think I thought about, I feel comfortable wearing one in that, scenario.
Yeah.
It's a little bit tricky.
Yeah, it's almost like you have a body cam. It's like now, it's like, are you the police and you're recording, and stuff like that. Yeah. So that's definitely something to consider for sure.
Yeah, for me, I wouldn't feel comfortable.
Again, some of the specs on this, like I said, 5K recording, 20 megapixel photos, has Hypersmooth 3.0, 4K 60, 1080, 240. I think that's pretty neat if you want to get the nice slow-mo shots. So you take that and get some nice slow-mo when you're skiing, Evelyn. And then it's, again, wide field of view. I think what's neat is here it has the removable lens cover. So if your lens gets scratched or broken, you can take that off and put a new one on, which makes sense considering how people actually use GoPros. And it goes for $450. And, let me throw it over to you. Brad, GoPro, you mentioned GoPro in sort of your partnership with them or, on a project, but do GoPros play a role at all in the wrestling footage, or do you use them at all?
They haven't yet, no, because it's just because of the way the TV show's configured. I'm not sure exactly where we would be able to use it. I wouldn't be against it if one of my photographers could come up with a really creative idea on where to put one. And I do have some photographers that could have that conversation, and I'm willing to explore it. Yeah. We have not yet, honestly, but it's certainly something to explore. And one of the things that shooting with no fans has allowed us to do is kind of explore some photo opportunities, with the remotes and things like that. So that's a possibility for sure. Yeah. We've definitely, trying to expand what we're doing. I don't want to have it look like the same thing we were doing 10 years ago. So it's an opportunity for us. Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'd say, stick a GoPro on each of the wrestlers and do first person wrestling.
Yeah. Well, my wife wants to stick one on the toddler's helmet for her scooter, the 2-year-old. So, and that's just for our own entertainment value. And partly because I got to tell you, it's really exhausting chasing a toddler around with your phone as she tries to scoot down the sidewalk or something, It's probably as unsafe as it could look, and it's really exhausting. So I think that the GoPro is a good alternative to that.
Perfect use case scenario. Okay, go ahead and drop that $450 right now for toddler cam.
Well, I'm definitely going to need the detachable lens covers, so I have to throw some of those in there too.
There you go.
There's a lot of crashing for a scooter.
Indeed. Evelyn, before we lose you, can you talk about your experience with the Canon R5, shooting it recently, and kind of what you think and your thoughts on it? Do you think it'll be your camera of choice, or are you still going to explore the Sonys?
Okay, all good questions. Loved it. My first time out, I literally pulled it out of the box, took it out to shoot the second night of RBG Vigils because I knew, it's dark, low light, and it had the reticulating screen, which was all fantastic. I didn't really know how to use the camera because I'm a Canon shooter already. I was able to sort of quickly transition for the very basic stuff, but I had no idea how to figure out focus tracking. So I just put it on one shot. So I was shooting one shot and sometimes also using the screen, which was amazing for focus. So until I try out the focus tracking and figure out how to do that, I'm not sure because I did the Sony was really amazing with the focus tracking. So I have to do like an apples to apples comparison. In terms of the menu situation and it being an easier the Sony menus were ridiculous. I think there were like 25 menus. I had a 2-hour tutorial with the Sony rep, and I'm sure you get used to that just like anything, but there are a lot of menus. For me, it was very easy to pick up the R5, go out and shoot, and I got great pictures, go out and shoot an assignment and not feel like, oh my gosh, this is a new camera, I don't know what I'm doing. The articulating screen, is that what I think that's what you call it, right?
Very angled display. Fantastic. But yes.
Varied angle display. I kept forgetting because I have the Mark IVs. And then I was like, wait, I can hold up the camera, turn the thing down, I got some really awesome crowd shots that I would not have been able to got. I mean, they would have just been a pure guess with the 5D Mark IV. That's the selling point. It also felt about 1,000 times faster. I mean, I just immediately knew that I'm switching very soon to a mirrorless system. I loved it. Was so quiet. I mean, I loved all of those things. Is it going to be Sony or is it going to be Canon? TBD. I've got to figure out how to do the focus tracking, and then I can give you a good comparison. But I will say, loved it, and for Canon users, super easy to switch over. I didn't try any of their new lenses. They sent me a 24 to 105, but it was f4, so I didn't even bother taking that out because it just didn't seem practical at all.
Yeah.
So I had to get my hands on one of the I don't know what you call them, but one of the new lenses that go with the mirrorless system. So I was just using the adapter, but it worked great, and I had no problems. I used all three of my lenses with the adapter, main lenses, all the 1635, 2470, and the 7200.
Right, the Trinity.
And that was all good. So I'd say right now, it'd be easier for me to go Canon, but maybe the focus. Until I learn the focus, I don't want to say one was better than the other.
Yeah.
I have to track on the Sony. I will say was awesome, but I'll let you know next week when I try the Canon tracking. But it felt good. The hand felt good.
Mm-hmm.
Felt better. I mean, the Sony has a funny shape to it. If you're the A9 II is better than the A9. I would not buy the A9.
Right.
I'd go A9 II, but the feel of the Canon is much more familiar feeling.
Yeah. That's what I've heard with Sony. They definitely,
and it was light.
Yeah, the Sonys have definitely had a challenge with their ergonomics, but I know they've improved over time. So, you'll definitely have to let us know what you finally end up choosing, because we're all waiting with bated breath. What will the final decision be? When are you going to make that final decision? By the way, is there like a deadline you've set for yourself?
No, I think I have to figure out the focusing, and then I have to decide too on the lenses. Like if I go Sony, do I want to use the Canon or adapter? I really like the Sony 7200. They had those buttons, focus tracking buttons on them. So when you're shooting with the Sony A9 II, you can lock in the focus on the lens. I don't know if the new Canon lenses have that. So TBD. I will keep you posted on my. You have it. I mean, do you have the new lens, Dave, on the R5?
Yeah, I've got the 24 to 105 RF lens, and
that's f4.
It's got that cool control dial, which allows you to have some additional functionality you can program onto it, but there's no focus locking buttons. It's either, you got your typical switches, like your OIS or your autofocus. You can turn that on or off. Yeah. You can lock the lens down, into the wide angle if you want to keep it locked. Or you can use the control dial to change certain things, like if you want to change ISO or shutter speed or certain settings, you can do that through the lens. The one thing I would tell you is before you make your final decision, really try out the cameras with the native glass, because it may be a different experience with regard to focus tracking. I know from Canon's own, press material, whatever, that they say, using the adapter is just like using the native glass. But, again, if you're going to adopt the mirrorless system, I think as you upgrade, you're going to probably want to upgrade your lenses at some point to that mirrorless system's native set. Just naturally as you upgrade.
They didn't have any except for the 24-105, and I really am not going to use that. I mean, that I can't imagine how I really use the f4 lens. So, but I will say one thing: the LCD. The one thing I hated about mirrorless that's prevented me from switching to mirrorless was how it looks. Right. The LCD. You're looking, it just always looked like a TV screen, and it didn't feel, and it looked that the R5 had a better look than the Sony.
Okay.
Felt more like a DSLR.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've noticed that, but
the viewfinder is absolutely awesome, and you can have that I think you can turn it on the settings to make it a high refresh rate to 120 hertz, and it's just like you're looking at you're looking through a viewfinder. There's no difference at that point.
Yeah, and I didn't feel that with the Sony. It definitely had that EVF kind of feel.
Right.
I don't have all the technical terms, but ergonomics, that's it. Hand feel. Got it. It's also morning. I'd love to hear what other people think, too. I mean, it'd be interesting.
Well, let us know down in the comments below. We have 6 viewers watching, so they should all let us know what they think about their mirrorless cameras. Well, Evan, if you have to jump off, I won't stop you. But I want to talk to Brad a little bit about the cameras that they use at the WWE. Brad, what are they using currently? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Before I jump off, I'm going to make a public request to Brad to be a reviewer at the WPOW, Women Photojournalists Washington Portfolio Review when we come back post-COVID.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm all up for that. Thank you very much.
Sounds good.
Evelyn, it's good to see you again.
Would love to have you. All right. Good to see you guys too.
Yeah, great.
I'm out.
All right, Evelyn, have a great rest of the day.
Take care.
Bye.
See you later.
Good luck Saturday.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Hey.
Yes, I know Evelyn had to step out, but definitely did want to continue our conversation for a few more minutes.
Sure.
And again, get into the technical, stuff with regard to camera gear. What are they using? Is there sort of a set camera equipment, or is it whatever the camera photographer brings to the event?
So again, I'm dealing with a situation where I have 2 full-time staff photographers.
Right.
And both of those photographers, through no reason other than that's what they're comfortable with, it's their personal choice, they use Canons. They both use Canons. And then I have a third photographer who works in the office, Georgiana Dallas, and she is a photo editor, but she's also our in-house photographer, meaning at the offices in Connecticut, if we need something photographed, it could just be some merchandise we need copied or a portrait of somebody, or there's an event there that she has to cover. She uses, she had her own camera, but then we purchased and Sony, it was the A7 is what we got for her. So we haven't gone all the way up the ladder on it, but it's perfect for what we need it for. And we found that the mirrorless is helpful in the office on occasion because sometimes she's in there's a meeting, some type of business meeting or something. And if you're in a boardroom and you're photographing, you really don't want people to know you're there with the shutter. So that's come in handy for that type of thing in the office. And she uses that. The guys, the Canon, they purchased 2 of the EOS Rs. So they have that first kind of round of the mirrorless Canon. Right. I know there are improved bodies available now, but we haven't gotten that far yet. We're just kind of using those for now.
Sure.
And that, again, is TV related. It's a TV show.
Yeah.
And occasionally we have things, there's the stuff you see on TV that's in the ring, and then there's always some backstage stuff, where we have some vignettes backstage, and we have some moments where, there's a confrontation, or there's a speech or a talk or whatever, and those type of things. Because again, the TV is involved, the mirrorless really comes in handy because we're just flies on the wall taking some quiet pictures while TV's rolling, and as it's happening, because we don't want to interfere, we don't want to be part of the story, we just want to cover the story. Right. So that's where those mirrorless have come in handy. And the 2 photographers, obviously, I gave them the choice. You can buy the Sony, you can buy the Canon, whatever you want. I want you to be comfortable. And they just went with the Canon because they're already comfortable with the Canon. So it's a natural transgression for them, transition rather for them. And then for my staff photographers, I would say, Dave, we're pretty split. If I have a core group of about 10 freelancers that I use, and then we've increased in the 3 years I've been there. We've more than doubled the amount of photographers we now use, even if it's on a part-time basis, because I had to expand that. We have a guy in the UK, and we have somebody in India, and we've got some people that we've kind of trained that if we're in those places, they can shoot for us, right? And they are pretty much split right down the line between Canon and Nikon originally when I started, and now Canon and Nikon and Sony. So between those 3, and that's the full time and so forth. So it's I thought it was going to be pretty much all Nikon and Canon with a Sony here and there, but in the last year or so, Sony's made a real push, and some of the guys have made the change. So I definitely, it's not exactly 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. So it's probably 65%, probably 75% is Canon and Nikon, and maybe a quarter of it is Sony. Is probably where we are.
Yeah, no, I mean the trajectory that Sony has taken since they entered the camera industry, so to speak, in this DSLR to now mirrorless has been phenomenal to see the progress they've made. I mean, they're now the camera of choice for the AP. That's their,
had made it. That's a huge sell
Yeah.
for them, and it was a big contract to get and so forth. I actually did consulting business with Sony when all this started. When I first started the consulting business the first time between the WWE and Sports Illustrated, and that came out of a Red Bull thing I was doing with Red Bull, and I met somebody from Sony, and they were talking about wanting to break into more of a market especially in North America. And their two primary objectives were to be a higher valued market within photojournalism and sports. Those were their two groups. And I worked with them on expanding their opportunities in sports. So I did a little consulting for them at the time, but it's just obviously then I got a job and I stopped doing that, but it's clearly exploded since then. They really have a good sales team for sure. They have a good marketing and sales team, and they've talked a lot of people into try our equipment, just give it an honest thing. And I don't think that a lot of these people would be switching over if they didn't think the product was comparable. Right. If it was so inferior to, let's say, Canon and Nikon, there's no way the AP would be switching. So they must think there's something positive about it and the equipment itself. So how that plays out, I don't know. And 10 years from now, we'll have the same conversation and they'll be using somebody else because that's how business works. But right now, this is Sony's time, and I think they're doing a great job. So
it's only a 2-year contract with AP. So, again, AP could say, well, thanks for your time, Sony. We're going to go back to Nikon or Canon or who knows,
very easily.
Pentax.
Yeah. But it's good for Sony right now. It gets their name out there, and it's a lot of things they can exploit as far as a marketing level goes, which is always a plus for them. And I think I look at it as it's nothing but good for the business because that has to drive Canon and Nikon. Let's face it, if you only have two companies, they can kind of do what they want.
And
pretty
then much.
If you add other players in there, then the game changes, I mean, for better or worse, it certainly drives the competition to be a better product. I think when you have somebody who's offering something else new, it makes you rethink your business plan a little bit. So.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, how long have we waited for Canon to actually innovate in the space?
Yeah.
I mean, mirrorless as a concept was only adopted by Canon and Nikon because Sony pushed so far in that space.
100%. And when you have a camera that is offering two things that is of utmost importance in a lot of venues, it's lighter weight, and it doesn't make any noise.
Right.
I mean, when you start adding those things in there, I think, the president is sitting there signing something and everybody's photographing. He's used to the shutter noise that comes with the deal.
Yeah.
But there are times where that's not, maybe it's appropriate, because not everything is celebratory like a bill signing. Sometimes it's somber, like a memorial or something. And then, it really helps to have the silent shutter. And if that's an option, why not? And you're clearly right. If we had waited for them to come up with it, maybe we still wouldn't.
No,
we'd still be waiting.
That's all right. We'd still be shooting probably 1080p video with our DSLR cameras,
Yeah. I think we've learned that in every business. I mean, look at car manufacturers. I mean, they are happy to go along at 14 miles a gallon until somebody invented an electric car or a hybrid, and it's like, oh well, guess what? Our trucks can now get miraculously 30 miles to the gallon. It's everybody has to adapt to that, and I think that this is nothing but a positive for Canon and Nikon, in the sense that their technology is going to have to shift with the times. And it's an improvement that all of us can benefit from.
Yeah, and they have shown, obviously, the ability to shift and change. They're a little late to the game, but they're getting there. And honestly, that's why I chose Canon as my camera of choice over Sony. Had Canon not innovated and shown their willingness to push the boundaries and create a camera that can shoot 8K and do all these magical things, regardless of its, propensity to overheat, I wouldn't have gone with them in my sort of transition back to full frame mirrorless. Now, obviously, I have a bias towards Canon because they were, I've used them in the past, but I had switched fully over to Panasonic, a brand I'd never even considered in the past to be my camera, just because they were innovating so much in the micro four thirds space. So, again, now that I'm in this full frame area with Canon, I don't know if there'd be something compelling enough from Sony now at this point to make me, go to them.
Right. And I think that the fact is that we all know that people like Canon and Nikon and Panasonic, for that matter, they employ world-class engineers. They have the capabilities and they have the brain power to figure it all out. This is all coming from somewhere else. This is a marketing strategy or a business strategy, or they're prioritizing this over that. And that's just, that's how businesses work, Yeah, there's somebody that could have come up with a car that makes 90 miles to the gallon, but that wasn't their priority at the time. So they didn't. And this is the same thing with the cameras. And I think that having somebody come out with a new type of model makes you rethink, and you can unleash those engineers who are all pretty brilliant to begin with, and certainly smarter than the average person is in this area to begin with. Now they can unleash it and say, here, come up with this. Oh yeah, we can do that. And then they all go back to work. And then again, like I said before, it just does nothing but benefit all of us,
Yeah.
Better equipment, better photos.
That's 100%.
There you go.
Yeah.
Let me rephrase that. Not better equipment, better photos. Better equipment, less bad photos.
There you go.
How about that?
Sure.
I'll be better that way.
Better equipment, more options. I would think. I would probably, capitalize
definitely
like
more
that.
options. Definitely more options.
Because again, with that autofocus in the new Canon, and even the Sony, of course, having what they've both been able to do with autofocus systems, it's really amazing the way they incorporate AI into it. Like, I can shoot a scene and it knows where the face is, it locks onto it, tracks it throughout the scene. It's amazing what technology has yielded in the last even 5 years. It's really amazing stuff.
Yeah,
and I'm sure those big companies probably hire similar to how the WWE hires. They give the engineers 2 cameras to figure things out. If they haven't figured it out by then, they kick them to the curb.
Yeah, well, it's my training session versus hire, but exactly correct.
Indeed.
Yeah, and I just want to say, my photographers that have switched and are using Sony, I mean, these aren't, there's not a Greg Heisler in there who's getting some kind of, maybe has a deal or because his name is so big and a spot. These are just working class photographers. They're really great at what they do. They're the best in the world at what they do. But it's not like they're shifting. AP shifting, let's be honest, that's a business decision. Like, Sony came to them and made a sale.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what that is. And nothing wrong with it. That's how it works. But that's what it was. It's a sale. And they wanted that pitch over Canon and Nikon.
Right.
Simple.
Yeah.
My guys aren't getting like a sale. They're like, I'm choosing this on my own for whatever reason. So that says a lot for that camera company that some of my guys who I really trust, that's the avenue they're going. And not all of them did. Like I said, maybe 25% are with Sony and the other 75 with Canon and Nikon. Nobody's with Olympus at this point. So.
Right. Well,
for me anyway.
Is Olympus even in the industry anymore? I think they exited the industry.
I don't know. I think now they're just in a mountain somewhere.
There you go.
Yeah,
no, I think you can't go wrong. There's so many great options out there, as we've said multiple times on the show.
Yep.
It's there's you wealth of options. We're rich with options, so you can't.
And everybody can argue the one you bought is the right one, and somebody else can argue the one you bought is the wrong one. So all you have to do is just do like every other major decision in your life, which is, this is what I'm comfortable with.
Right.
This is where I am. I found my comfort space. I'm happy here. Leave me alone. This is where I'm going. You know what I mean? It's just, we all know there isn't a massive difference between the three of them that's so great that like you're going to fail with one and you're only going to succeed with the other. That's not the case. So whatever your comfort level is and you're happy with, just go with it and make great pictures. That's all you should be concerned about.
That's right. And the person looking at the picture will have no idea what you shot it with. They just want to
see
beautiful shots. Right, exactly.
Nor do they care.
No one
couldn't care less.
Absolutely. We're the only ones who care. Us photo nerds.
And that's okay. I mean, I'm all for having a conversation and the tech question, and I get like going over it and making a decision. But at the end of the day, nobody else cares except you. But that's important that you do. But that's where it ends, right there. So just enjoy it, take great pictures, and that's all that matters is the visuals.
Indeed, and that's where this show ends, right here.
Beautiful.
So Brad, please tell people where they can find out more about you and your work.
Thank you. Well, the creative part is bradsmithcreative.com. That's my website, and all my contact information is on there. And if anybody's interested in that part of it, any consulting, they can go there. But my email is also on there if somebody wants to use that to reach me at the WWE. My email address at the WWE is Bradley.Smith at WWEcorp.com. brad@unveils.com. That's my email there. So either email, they could reach out if they are interested in shooting with the WWE. Like I said, we've increased the number of shooters dramatically over the last couple of years. We have a huge stable of photographers that I'm really proud of, and we have a lot of people. And we're always looking for more people because there are areas where we could improve on. So
Sure.
I'm always looking, if somebody's really, that's their passion to shoot wrestling, by all means, reach me there. And if they have any interest in upgrading their portfolio or having somebody look at their work and giving them an honest a declaration of where their work is going, happy to help them with that with Brad Smith Creative.
That's awesome. Great. Well, thank you, Brad, so much for taking time out to be on the show.
Oh, thank you, Dave.
Truly
It's a
appreciate
pleasure
it.
to be on the show. Thank you.
We're glad to have you back. You're always welcome back. Love having you on to talk about all great things going on in your world.
Thank you.
And
I'll let you know next time I have something interesting.
Sure, absolutely. Let me know. We'll have you
Great.
back on. We'll talk about it.
I appreciate it.
Awesome. All right.
Thanks, Dave.
Well, this has been Around the Lens, episode 243. I've been your host, David J. Murphy. If you'd like to continue the conversation, by all means, do so on one of our social media networks. Of course, Facebook, you're on right now. You're probably watching this live. You can comment down below. You can tell Brad what kind of camera you're using. You can find us on YouTube. We're also on Instagram and Twitter, and you can find links to all of our social media on aroundthelens.com. If you'd like to support us financially, you can also donate to our Patreon page and get everything we do a little bit ahead of time, and you can help support the show financially and help us expand what we're doing here on the platform. All right. Well, thanks again, Brad. Truly appreciate your time.
Thank you. I listen, I just, on behalf of just the photography business in general, shows like yours and this one specifically, it does a lot. And I just know that every one of us appreciate what you do for the business in general. Thank you.
Thanks, Brad. That means a lot. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Welcome.
All right. Well, I've been David J. Murphy. This has been Around the Lens, episode 243, and we are out.
Thanks for listening to Around the Lens. We hope you enjoyed the show. To continue the conversation, head on over to one of our social media outlets such as Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or Twitter. To support the show financially, consider donating to us via Patreon. For show notes from this week's episode and links to everything else we talked about, just go to our website, aroundthelens.com. Finally, if you or someone you know might be a good guest for the show, get in touch with us via email at info@aroundthelens.com.